40,000-year-old weapons, how did ancient humans make them? This should not exist, but it does. 40,000 years ago, before metal, before written language, before anything we would recognize as advanced civilization, humans were already creating weapons with a level of precision that feels almost impossible. Not crude tools. Not random shapes. But carefully designed blades, balanced spears, and engineered points that could strike with accuracy and force. The contradiction is simple. According to everything we understand about human development, this level of design should not appear this early. And yet, it does. The mystery begins in the ground, where archaeologists uncover fragments of a forgotten world. At first glance, these tools seem ordinary stone, bone, simple materials shaped by survival. But when examined closely, something changes. The edges are too clean. The symmetry too perfect. The angles too consistent. These are not accidental forms. They are intentional. And intention requires something more than instinct. It requires planning, a mental blueprint, an idea that exists before the object itself. The common explanation tells a comfortable story. Early humans learned slowly, over thousands of years, through trial and error. A sharper edge cuts better. A straighter spear travels farther. Knowledge improved step by step, generation after generation. It's a logical process, one that fits neatly into our understanding of evolution. But when we look at the evidence, the timeline doesn't fully match. Because some of these weapons appear suddenly, already refined, already efficient, as if the slow process of learning has been skipped entirely. And that is where the tension begins to build. Because if these tools didn't evolve gradually, then how did they appear? What triggered such a sudden leap in design? To answer that, we have to look beyond the tools themselves and focus on the minds that created them. Around this time in history, something unusual was happening inside the human brain. Cognitive abilities were expanding. The capacity to imagine, to plan ahead, to understand cause and effect, these were not just emerging, they were accelerating. Humans were no longer reacting to the world moment by moment. They were beginning to think in sequences, to visualize outcomes before taking action. But even this explanation has limits. Because advanced thinking alone doesn't guarantee advanced results. Knowledge still needs to be shared, refined, preserved. And that brings us to the next layer of the mystery, communication. How did this knowledge move from one individual to another? There was no writing. No formal teaching systems. And yet, the consistency of these weapons suggests that techniques were being passed down with surprising accuracy. Some researchers believe early humans developed highly structured ways of teaching using gestures, repetition, and demonstration. A kind of silent language of skill. Not written, but remembered. Not recorded, but performed. Still, something doesn't fully add up. Because when scientists attempt to recreate these tools today using only primitive methods, they often struggle. It's not impossible, but it requires time, patience, and experience. Which means the people who originally made these weapons were not experimenting randomly. They knew what they were doing. They had already mastered the process. And that raises a deeper question. Where did that mastery come from? One possibility is that small groups of highly skilled individuals drove this innovation. Perhaps a few early humans discovered more efficient techniques and refined them over time. These individuals may have acted as carriers of knowledge, moving across regions, teaching others, spreading ideas long before the existence of formal culture. In this view, innovation didn't happen everywhere at once, it spread, quietly, through human movement. But then comes a discovery that changes everything. When researchers began analyzing the materials used in these weapons, they found that many of them were not local. The stone had been transported from distant locations. Sometimes over vast distances. This means ancient humans were not just reacting to their immediate environment. They were making decisions, planning ahead, and selecting specific resources for specific purposes. They were thinking about the future. This is the moment where the story shifts. Because now, these weapons are no longer just tools. They are evidence of something far more significant, a change in how humans understood the world. The ability to imagine an outcome, to plan for it, and then to execute that plan using raw materials. This is not instinct. This is design. And then comes the twist. The real breakthrough was not the weapon itself. It was the invisible process behind it. The ability to hold an idea in the mind, something that does not yet exist, and then shape reality to match that idea. That is the foundation of everything humans would later create. Art, architecture, technology, civilization itself. But here's where the mystery deepens even further. Because once this ability appears, it doesn't fade. It expands. It accelerates. Which suggests that what we are seeing in these 40,000-year-old weapons is not the beginning of intelligence, but the moment it becomes visible. The moment it leaves a trace in the physical world. Imagine standing there, in that distant past. The air is cold. The landscape is unforgiving. Survival is uncertain. And in your hands, you hold a piece of stone. To most, it's just a rock. But to you, it's something else. You can see what it could become. A blade. A tool. A weapon. Something that gives you an advantage. Something that increases your chances of survival. That moment, when you see possibility where nothing exists, that is the moment everything changes. Because from that point forward, humans are no longer limited to what they find. They begin to create what they need. And that is why this mystery matters. Not because of the weapons themselves, but because of what they reveal about us. These objects are not just remnants of the past. They are proof of a transformation, the point where human thinking crossed a threshold. Where imagination, planning, and knowledge combined into something powerful. Something that still defines us today. If this ability appeared once, in a world with no guidance, no history, no instruction, then what else might humans be capable of? That is the question these ancient weapons leave behind. And it is still unanswered. But the deeper we look, the more this story begins to change, because these ancient weapons were not just carefully made, they were part of something much larger, something structured. When researchers studied different excavation sites, they noticed a pattern that shouldn't be there. These tools were not randomly scattered across the landscape. They were often found alongside other highly specific instruments, scrapers, cutters, shaping tools, each designed for a particular purpose. This wasn't random survival anymore. This was organization, and organization implies a system. It suggests that early humans were not only making tools, they were thinking in sequences, dividing tasks, and possibly even assigning roles within a group. And once you consider that possibility, everything becomes more complex. Because now, these weapons are no longer the product of a single individual experimenting in isolation. They are the result of shared knowledge, refined over time, preserved through repetition, and passed from one mind to another with surprising accuracy. One individual may have specialized in shaping stone, another in selecting the right material, another in using the finished weapon effectively. This level of coordination suggests something deeper than instinct. It suggests early forms of collaboration that resemble the foundations of human society itself. But then comes something even more unexpected. Some of these weapons show clear signs of repair. Not replacement, repair. Broken edges were reshaped, damaged tips were carefully reworked, and worn surfaces were refined again to extend their use. This detail may seem small, but it changes everything. Because repair requires understanding. It means the maker didn't just know how to create the tool, they understood how it functioned. They knew why it was shaped a certain way, and how to restore that function when it was lost. That level of knowledge is not accidental. It is learned, practiced, and remembered. And then the mystery deepens further when scientists begin to analyze the origin of the materials used in these weapons. In many cases, the stone was not local. It had been transported from distant locations. Sometimes across rivers, valleys, or completely different terrains. This means early humans were not simply using what was available around them. They were selecting specific materials for specific purposes, planning journeys to acquire them, and carrying them back with intention. This is not short-term thinking. This is long-term strategy. At this point, the entire narrative shifts. Because now, we are no longer looking at primitive humans reacting to their environment. We are looking at minds capable of planning ahead, making decisions based on future outcomes, and investing effort into creating tools that may not be used immediately, but will be essential later. This is foresight. This is the ability to step outside the present moment and imagine what comes next. But here's where the real twist begins to emerge. When modern researchers attempt to recreate these tools using only the same primitive conditions, no modern equipment, no advanced guidance, they often struggle to match the same level of precision. It is possible, but it requires skill, patience, and repeated practice. Which means the original makers of these weapons were not beginners. They were experienced, highly skilled. And that raises a question that is difficult to answer. How long did it take them to reach that level? And why don't we see more evidence of that learning process? Because what we often find are the finished results, not the early mistakes. It's as if the process of trial and error is partially hidden from us. And that creates a gap in the story. A gap where something important is missing. Some researchers believe this gap may be the result of lost knowledge. Small groups of humans may have developed advanced techniques, refined them over generations, and then disappeared, taking part of that knowledge with them. What remains are fragments, scattered across time, giving us only a partial view of what once existed. Others suggest that knowledge may have spread much faster than we assume, moving through human migration in ways we still don't fully understand. But the deeper truth may be even more fundamental. Because the real breakthrough was not the tool itself, or the technique used to create it. It was the mental process behind it, the ability to imagine something before it exists, to hold that image in the mind, and then shape the physical world to match that vision. That is not just tool making. That is abstract thinking. And once that ability appears, it changes everything. Imagine holding a piece of stone in your hand, thousands of years ago. To most, it's just a rock. But to you, it's something else entirely. You can see what it could become. You can predict how it will break, how it will shape, how it will function when it's complete. That moment, when the mind sees beyond what is physically present, that is the moment where human intelligence truly begins to reveal itself. And that is why this mystery matters. Because these weapons are not just evidence of survival. They are evidence of transformation. The point where humans stopped simply reacting to the world, and began to design it with intention. The point where knowledge became something that could be built, shared, and improved. And once that process begins, it never stops. Everything we have today, every invention, every system, every piece of technology, can be traced back to that single shift in thinking. So if this made you think differently, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who enjoys these kinds of mysteries. And tell me in the comments, what do you think really happened 40,000 years ago?